Have you guys ever wondered what it takes to be the cinematographer for some of the best documentaries in the world? Like, how does someone go from working in a gear rental house to winning Emmy Awards and DPing the Oscar-nominated doc Cartel Land? Well, you're in luck because in this video, I'm going to be picking the brain of Matt Porwoll, one of the most talented documentary cinematographers I know and just a super nice guy all around. These are just a few of the highlights from a much longer conversation, but we get into a whole bunch of stuff here, like how Matt got his start and what you can learn from that, how he deals with the ups and downs of the freelance film life, and some great advice for just how to be an all-around better DP. I mean, if you asked me to make a list of my top 10 favorite docs, Cartel Land would definitely have a place on there, and I got so much out of this, as I think you will. If you want to see the full unedited conversation that's over an hour long and you weren't able to get in to snag one of the 100 spots in my documentary cinematography course, you can put your name on the waitlist, link in the description for the next intake, and I'll let you know when it opens back up. There's interviews with multiple award-winning DPs and directors there, and I'll be adding more and more over time. But the first session sold out before the pre-order phase was even over, so for now, your best bet is to get on that waitlist. But in the meantime, let's enjoy these amazing insights from one of the best DPs in the business. I know I did. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We have a really exciting interview with a really great DP who I've had the pleasure of working with. Matt himself is an Emmy Award winner and a Sundance Award winning cinematographer. He's based in New York. He's shot for pretty much all the big people you can imagine. He's done Cartel Land, which is extremely well known, and a ton of other really great projects. So Matt, thank you so much.
Absolutely, thanks for having me.
I thought we'd just sort of start at the beginning and go a little chronologically. How did you get into this sort of niche position?
It's funny because I have always wanted to be a cinematographer. Since probably early high school, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And after I graduated college, I moved to New York. And from some great advice from a cinematographer I had met in college was go work at a rental house. Not only will that be a great way to learn the equipment that you're going to have to work with, but it's also going to be a great way to meet everybody who's working in that field. You're going to meet all the camera assistants that are coming through for prep. You're going to meet the cinematographers, the producers, the production companies. So when I moved to New York, I was working at Able Cine. Able's one of those shops that, especially at that time, that was 2005, there was a lot of TV, and then there was the documentary productions. And when I started looking at the types of people in each one of those industries and the types of jobs that were being done, and honestly, the places that people were going, I just kept looking at it saying, man, this documentary thing is pretty fascinating. Like it was a job, but it seemed more like a part of their everyday life. They're traveling the world. They're coming back with the most incredible stories. And so I very quickly kind of fell into that. And it was through that experience that, when I left Able, I was able to kind of call on those producers and camera assistants and DPs and say, hey, keep me in mind, if you guys have a job. And so it was through that I started working as a camera assistant. And I was a camera assistant for about 10 years, working under the best, kind of documentary verite cinematographers, which to me is kind of the absolute best way to get into this business. Because being a cinematographer, especially a documentary one, is a very difficult thing. And a lot of it has absolutely nothing to do with the camera, the technology, any of that. It's how do you come into a scene? How do you establish relationships? How do you build a story? And so, I do like to tell people that I know how much you want it, but it's okay to take your time in developing that career.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think every origin story I've heard of involves some level of lucky break, but it's not a repeatable science. It's just sort of being prepared for a long enough time and putting yourself in the situation so that when that guy does break his leg, you're sort of there.
Well, and I would say that the common denominator of all of those stories is perseverance and patience. Because without either one of those things, the break is never going to happen to you. It's going to happen to someone that is looking for it harder or waiting for it longer. For me, I mean, I think it didn't feel like a break at the time, but the first time that I worked with Matt Heineman, who I had worked on a lot of films with since then. I was a camera assistant. Wolfgang Held was the cinematographer of a film called Escape Fire that Matt was directing. It was his first film. And it was through that process that, I was able to kind of figure out more of what Matt wanted from a visual standpoint as opposed to from kind of a assistant logistics standpoint. And so I was learning that. And it was after that film that, he got the article that Cartelland was based off and said, hey, read this article. What do you think about it? You want to go to Arizona with me? And so we started kind of the process of shooting development and making that happen. And the next thing I know that now it's, the two of us are off to the races and we're making Cartelland. And it was kind of, it never looked back from that point forward. A break came from that the first feature doc that I ever shot was Cartelland that ended up being nominated for an Oscar. I mean, it was wild.
That was your first?
That was my first kind of legitimate feature doc. Yeah.
Wow.
So
were you surprised? Know. That must have changed things pretty dramatically, no?
It definitely changed things. By the time Cartelland started, I was already starting to feel the end of what I feel like I could get out of being a camera assistant. But then this opportunity came and it was like, okay, great. Like now I'm actually, without thinking about it, was hired for this job and I'm doing it. So that became my, okay, that's it. Like I'm done. I'm not assisting anymore. I'm now shooting. And it was wild because that film had, such an incredible ride. And after all the dust settled, I probably didn't work for 8 months or a year after that movie, just because it was a combination of making the shift from being an assistant to being a cinematographer, from constantly telling people I'm not available because I'm making this film, to then it having so much success that everybody assuming that I'm booked and busy. So it was one of those things that was interesting, but that's part of the game.
That's wild. I imagine a lot of people would think that, with the success that a film like that had, that immediately you would just be booked solid on all the most prestigious things right away. I know a lot of people watching probably are coming from almost more of a one-man band, maybe smaller markets, where this whole industry with a capital I of the documentary business might not really exist in the same way. How do you think you could position yourself or start making those kind of contacts or get yourself into the more professional side of the industry if you were in a B market?
I can tell you that most documentaries that I've worked on have not been shot in big markets. They've been shot in very, very small towns across America and the world. And so what that means is that the production companies and ourselves have to find who are we going to hire to come in to do sound, who's going to shoot second camera, who's going to be our camera assistant, who are the PAs. And we're getting all of that locally. So start subbing in for people and kind of getting into that world. And, there are doc filmmakers, directors, producers everywhere. And so get in with them and start doing the same kinds of films locally and not kind of relying on outside projects to keep you employed. And remember too, that most of the films that we all think of as being kind of the biggest memorable films, most of those were all made the exact same way of having no distribution, trying to raise money, going from grant to grant to grant, filling in the shoots when you can, but all focused on the fact that this is a story that we think is worth telling.
So yeah, I think that's probably really encouraging. You're basically saying like you can do it anywhere. You don't have to move to New York City to have a successful career. I started calling, it was a few years in before I started using the word cinematographer, and I think a lot of people think of documentaries as, cinematographers are for Hollywood and videographers shoot documentary, right? Like what's the difference to you? Like how do you apply that cinematography mindset to documentaries where you don't have big crews and you can't set up?
I think it all boils down to nothing technical at the end of the day. I think to me, the way that I kind of see them is videography is more of you're kind of coming in, it's a job, you're capturing a frame that tells that story, but it's not as It doesn't have the depth to it. And I think even the films that really had big recognition or were kind of just always part of the conversation also didn't necessarily look good per se, because you're shooting with available light, you're chasing everything, it's always chaos, nothing's going to be perfect. But they were perfect in the storytelling. They were perfect in how it was captured and the mood that was conveyed in how it was shot. It doesn't have to be the lighting that makes good cinematography. It's where was the camera placed? Do you feel like there's a perspective, a point of view? And so to me, that is kind of the major distinction of how much are you thinking and listening and processing the story as the person who has to visually convey it to an audience.
And you said something earlier that, it's not necessarily all about technical ability. And I've been sort of preaching this for a long time, that your social skills and the soft skills behind how you approach this job are almost as much of a determiner of your success as your pure technical ability, because there are so many talented technical shooters. How do you think there's an optimistic future for documentary cinematographers, or how do you see things progressing? Like, where are the opportunities going to come?
If you were asking me, how likely is it that you can have a very sustainable job as a documentary cinematographer when I started, I would say probably not very at all. Well, now it's the only thing that people watch on television, in one way or another. And so you've got so many opportunities to make and work in docs all the time. So yeah, the little bump in the road now, I'm not super worried about. I think that the consumer wants doc material, so it's not going anywhere.
Okay, guys, hope you liked that as much as I did. You can just tell, I think, from listening to Matt that he is like at the top level of DPs, and just watch some of the work he's done. Watch Cartel Land, watch Once Upon a Time in Uganda, and you'll see just how good he is. And he's such a nice guy. He's actually got his own YouTube channel, so I'll put the link to that in the description. You should definitely check it out as well. He's an amazing teacher as well as a really good DP. So obviously that wasn't the full conversation. We talked for way over an hour. That was just some highlights that we picked out, but I don't want these videos to get out of control. If you like that conversation and want to see the long extended version, the course is full, like I said, but if you put your name on the wait list, you can get in on the next intake, and there's the full version of that, plus conversations with other professionals. We've got an Oscar-winning director in there, a really great natural history shooter, and I'm going to be adding more and more over time. So check out the link in the description, and big thanks to Matt. That was a ton of information from one of the very best in the business. So yeah.